Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we have a really fun video. I've been really looking forward to filming this. I recently went to Sephoria, which is a beauty event put on by Sephora. They do it once a year. This year it was in Atlanta, Georgia, which is pretty close to where I live, so I was able to go. And I was able to attend a Makeup by Mario Masterclass when I was there. The Mario himself taught a masterclass. He did makeup on a model and I was just in heaven, number one. And I took notes, okay? I have notes. I didn't do this while I was in the masterclass, okay? I took as many videos as I could so I could remember things. And then I came back and I wrote out everything I could remember that he said. So I wanted to do a video chatting about Sephoria and also, most importantly, the masterclass and everything that I learned. And I'm going to recreate the look that he did on the model. I'm not going to use every single shade that he used, but I have almost all the products that he used. So we're going to recreate it. And as we go, I'll kind of explain what he said about each step and how he applied it, tips and tricks, anything that I can remember. Also, Sephora did film the entire masterclass. It's up on their YouTube channel now, so I will link it in the description box as well. So if you want to go watch him do it and actually see it in action and listen to him talk and everything, I will link it for you. If you really love makeup, and especially him, which I don't know how you wouldn't love him, you will love this masterclass. So definitely go watch it. It's definitely worth the watch. And if you are new here, my name is Blair and I do all kinds of beauty content here on YouTube. I love makeup, I love beauty, and I would love for you to subscribe if you haven't already. So let's get into the video. All right, I don't have really anything on my skin. I did my skincare routine, but that was like an hour or so ago. So I wanted to start with skin prep. He first of all said that he likes a very simple skin prep routine. He said he typically uses like a micellar water, goes over a client's face first, which I thought that was kind of interesting. That's not something I would think to do, but he did say that. And then after that, he said he likes a really good moisturizer. He doesn't rely on serums or anything like that. He did say his two favorite moisturizers, because someone in the audience asked him what his favorite moisturizers were. And I wasn't really shocked by his answer. He said, of course, he loves Augustinus Botter's moisturizer, the Rich Cream, which I wasn't shocked by. It seems like all celebrity makeup artists really love that one. But he said the other one that he loves is another favorite, which is this one, the Embryolisse Creme Concentrate. And this is what he used on the model that he did the makeup on that day. So we'll use a little bit of this. I honestly don't use mine very much. I have it, but this isn't something I use all the time. I think of it more as like a makeup artist kind of prep product. And I don't regularly or ever really do makeup on anyone but myself. So I don't really use mine too much. I have tons of moisturizers that I use in my skincare routine, but I don't really use this particular one much, but I figured we'll do a light layer of this today because he did mention this one specifically. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and apply SPF. Now, this is not something that he touched on in the masterclass, and I'm guessing it's because he was kind of explaining how he does things in terms of like a client makeup, like red carpet kind of makeup, things like that, like event makeup. I'm kind of surprised no one asked him about SPF, because as he was doing the makeup, people were in the audience were like yelling questions at him, which he answered all of them, which I also thought was just really nice. And he was very just humble, and you can tell just a very kind person. So no one asked that question though, which I think is kind of interesting, kind of surprised. But I am gonna obviously apply my SPF first. And I'm just using my favorite as always, which is this one from Skin 1004. While I'm waiting for the SPF to sink in, one other thing that he said in terms of prepping the skin was that he's not very big into primers, which I was happy to hear him say. I'm not a huge primer person either, just personally. I think skin prep and, you know, setting spray, powders, things like that, I also think make a bigger difference than primer. I think primers, not always, but they often cause more problems, and it's just not a step I feel is necessary. And he kind of said the same thing. He did say years ago he kind of went through a phase where for a year or two he kind of played around with primers, but he did say that he's not a big primer person. In fact, he even said he doesn't use eye primers on the eyes. He uses concealer for eye primer and then just sets it with some powder. He said that he's old school, and you know, back in the day when he was learning makeup, they didn't have eye primers, so he doesn't use them. So I thought that was interesting too. All right, now that I've let the skin prep really sink in, we'll get started with the makeup. Now, he started with eyes, and I was sitting here thinking, do I want to do it the way he did it, which is with the eyes? I am typically a skin person first and then the eyes. He did do a smokier look on the model, and I'm going to try to do what he did on the model on myself. Sometimes with a smokier look, it does make more sense to do the eyes first. I think I'm going to do skin first though, because that's just what feels right to me. So let's talk about foundation. Of course, he used his foundation, which is the Surreal Skin Foundation. If you're familiar with my channel, I am not a huge fan of this foundation. One of the biggest reasons being that I don't have a great shade match in this foundation. But since he did use this foundation, I still have it. I was planning to declutter it, but I do still have mine. So we're gonna use it today since, of course, that's what he used on the model. And I'm just gonna go in with this. Now I am going to add a little bit of a white mixer with mine because this shade is a little bit dark for me. I just don't have a great match in his foundation. So I'm gonna try to make this a little bit better by adding the white pigment. But he used like a painter's palette when he was mixing things, and that's something else that I took away from him is he literally mixed everything. He never applied just one shade of any product. He mixed foundation, concealer, bronzer colors, blush colors, lip liner colors, eyeshadow colors. He literally mixed everything. And I'm gonna apply the foundation with his brush. I have a lot of his brushes actually that he used. He used this one a ton. This is the F4. And I wanna say he used the smaller end for the foundation, but he really built it up on the brush. He did that with pretty much everything. He warmed everything up on his hand first, and he talked a lot about starting from the center of the face when applying, and he talked about applying small layers. He said, you always want to restrain yourself is what he kept saying when you are applying makeup, because it's always easier to add more. It's much harder, you know, to take away once you put it on. Hopefully this color is okay. Something else really interesting to me that he said was he does not like to apply much foundation at all on the perimeters of the face. And he said there was a few reasons for that. Number one, which is probably the most obvious, is, you know, most people are gonna want to bronze in this area or this area. So he thinks, or he said that he likes to apply very minimal foundation in that area. He also said that typically most people, their forehead is a little bit darker than the rest of their face, as well as like the rest of the perimeter of the face. So he said if you're using a lighter color that matches like the center of your face and you bring it everywhere, it doesn't really match this portion of your face anyway, which I've never heard anyone really say that. But he talked about that quite a bit, how he likes to apply majority of the product right here, basically in the center of the face, and keep as little product as possible on the outer portions. And then he also said, obviously, you know, we want to avoid layering on too much makeup all over the face. So he said, you know, if you avoid putting a ton on the perimeter, then you're avoiding unnecessary layers, which makes sense. Because his big thing, he also said over and over, was he wants, no matter what kind of makeup it is or who he's doing makeup on, he wanted it to look as natural as it possibly can. And the way to do that is to do light layers and not layer and layer and layer when you don't need to. All right, I'm gonna stop there for now, and we'll add concealer in a little bit with a little bit more coverage. But one thing I'm gonna do quickly, now he did not do this. He went in with concealer and not a color corrector, but I love a color corrector, so I am gonna apply a little bit of this. He didn't really address color correcting. He did say when he was applying concealer, he liked certain shades with certain undertones for under the eyes, like ones that have a peachier undertone for corrective purposes. So he did say that. So I'm assuming he typically does that. He kind of mixes shades depending on the discoloration under the eyes. But he didn't say a ton about color correcting itself, which this model, she was beautiful and she did not need any color correcting. But I am gonna apply just a little of my Caliray corrector, and then we'll move into his concealer. All right, moving on to concealer. There were so many things that he said, but obviously, again, he used his concealer, which is the Surreal Skin Concealer. Now, this is the other product of his. Honestly, I love pretty much all of his products. The two that I'm not crazy in love with are the foundation and the concealer. But one thing, several things he said, but they did actually already expand the shade range on the concealer. So I, a few weeks ago, did buy one of the new shades of concealer. So we'll use both. I have my original shade and the new shade as well. I have the shade, I believe my original one is 160. Yeah, 160, and then the new shade is 190. Now, he again applied the concealer from the back of his hand, and he mixed shades. I forget which shades he used. The shades he used on her wouldn't work on me because she had a really beautiful, warm, caramel toned complexion. So this is one of the new shades, which is 190. And then we also have 160, which is one of the original shades, which this one is a good bit lighter, and it has a little bit of like a pinkier undertone. This one's a little bit more neutral. So I'm actually gonna kind of mix the two shades together because the original shade that I've had, which is 160, is a little bit too light for me. I'm not a big fan of really light concealers, as you may know, but the way he applied concealer was from the back of his hand, but he used his EF1 brush, which I don't have. It's like a little shader type brush that kind of looks like this one, and then the other side is a bigger, kind of fluffier blending brush. But he took the concealer, I don't think I got enough actually, and he literally kind of just placed it with the shader end of the brush. And I remember him saying he applied a really thin layer. I didn't apply a ton, so it's not going to show up as much on me, but he applied probably a little bit more than this, and he just kind of let it sit there. He didn't really touch it. He just kind of placed it and then let it sit for a minute or two while he was answering some questions. I actually like that color mixed together. Another thing that he said, which I also thought was very interesting, is he does not typically bring concealer up into the lower lash line. He leaves a little bit of a space there. He said the only time he really brings it all the way up is if he's trying to really elongate an eye shape or something like that. But typically he does not bring concealer up into this lash line, which I kind of do that too when I apply makeup. I kind of purposely don't go up here because I just find that, first of all, that's where a lot of us have tiny little fine lines. And, you know, if you take product there and you have little fine lines there, it's gonna get in the fine lines, you know what I mean? All right, so after it had been sitting for a minute or two, he used his concealer brush, which I don't have. I think it's the E5 maybe, but it's a little like angled brush that looks pretty much like this one, the BK Beauty A506. And he took that brush and just pressed it in. Pretty much everything he did in a pressing motion. Nothing he did went like this or like this. Every single thing he did, he really pressed into the skin. He also really talked about, after you apply the concealer with the foundation, to make sure you go on the outside edges of the concealer and really blend it into the foundation so that there's not like a harsh line or anything like that. Before we move on, now this he did not do on the model because she didn't need any more coverage, but I'm going to take a little bit of the 190 concealer shade and I'm going to go back into the foundation brush and just grab that concealer from the back of my hand. He did talk a lot about how it's easier to apply a really heavy layer of foundation initially than it is to apply a really thin layer and then later on kind of adjust and add coverage where you need it. He said that's the key to natural makeup to him, was to apply really sheer layers, even if, you know, initially you don't get the coverage that you want or you need. But he said that that was the key to really skin-like, beautiful, natural makeup, and that that's the hard way to do it. It's not the easy way. He said it's so much easier to take a fuller coverage foundation and take like a ton of it at once and put it all over your face. He said it's much, much harder to restrain yourself. He kept saying that over and over, how you really have to learn when you're doing makeup on other people or even yourself, if you want it to look a certain way, to really restrain your techniques and your product amount that you're using. Moving on to powder. This is something he talked a lot about. Obviously, he used his new Surreal Skin powder. First of all, he talked about how powder was his favorite way to make makeup last. He said it's way more important than primer or anything else. Powder is your friend. And he said your makeup won't last without powder, period. Doesn't matter what kind of skin you have. He said now if you have drier skin, if you have really, really dry skin, then, you know, maybe skip powder or apply less powder. But he said overall, most people need powder for their makeup to last. They just do. And of course he used his powder. He, again, mixed the powder shades. On her, he used shade 4 and shade 2. I'm gonna use shade 2. Now, he also used a brush and a puff. And I do have his puff. He gave everybody a puff, so we'll move on to the puff in a minute. But he started with a brush and he used this one, which I love this brush also. It's the F3. But he took the fluffier end and really worked the powder into the brush and just started applying. But he said, you know, if you use a brush like this, this is going to give you a much more sheer application than using the puff. So he said that's why he likes to do the brush first, to get like a lighter, even coat of the powder, and then go in with the puff in other areas where it's needed. And yes, he did do powder before bronzer and blush. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Someone did ask him in the audience what his favorite makeup launch was from this year from his brand, and he said the powder, because he uses powders so much on clients and he just felt like he really needed a powder with his brand. So he said that was his favorite launch of the year. But he was very like, with the brush, he was so like light-handed with it. He held the brush like really far out and just, it was so crazy to watch, honestly. Crazy like in a good way. I just loved it. And then he took a little bit of powder with his powder puff. Now this is his puff. Actually, they gave these out to everybody in the masterclass. They had them just sitting on all the chairs. And he used this puff a lot. So let me open this up. So his puff is kind of on the larger side. It's really, really soft, really, really soft. But he said that this puff was different than other puffs because of how thin you can make it. They're not as chunky and heavy as like some of the Amazon puffs, or that's what he said. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna take a little bit more powder, and he didn't use the puff all over the face. What he did was he looked after he'd done the face with the F3 brush, and anywhere that looked still like a little bit shiny, he just kind of patted there with the puff. And he did also kind of tap. He used his hand, but he kind of tapped it before he went in on the face. But he focused a lot right here, which he even said, you know, most people, when they get shiny, it's right here, which on myself, that's definitely true. But I saw him go in right here quite a bit with the puff. But this puff, I see what he's saying. It is really nice because it's very like malleable. Like you can really manipulate it if you want. One other thing I was going to mention, I just thought of, that he said, someone asked him, do you still set a concealer that's considered self-setting? Because his concealer is considered a self-setting concealer, and he said yes. Even if the concealer claims to be self-setting, he said that doesn't mean that you don't use any powder. It just means you could probably use a little bit less powder because it already has something in it to help set the concealer. But he said he still sets concealer even if it's self-setting. All right, moving into bronzer. All right, so the bronzing product that he used was this one, which we all know and love. And he even said this is his favorite bronzing product, is this one, which I'm not surprised by because this is a fantastic product. But the most interesting thing that he said was this is actually made to go over powder. I always apply this like I do normally with cream bronzers. I would not apply it over a powder typically, but he said these were formulated to go over powder. And he said the reason for that is because the powder grips the cream and it gives the skin a more natural quality, he called it cloudy skin, I believe I wrote down, yeah, he called it cloudy skin when you apply a cream like this over a powdered base. It gives like a skin-like quality, and he called it cloudy skin. And he, of course, mixed shades. He mixed shades dark and medium dark, I think. But I'm just going to use this one. This is the only one I have, which is light medium. Something else he said was he really coated the whole brush. I think he used the F4 again, the larger side, I want to say. And he really kind of talked about coating every single hair. So he said, make sure you really build it up on the brush and get every single hair, because that's how it's going to apply on your face. And if you don't apply it evenly on the brush, it's not going to look even on your face. Which, I mean, this is definitely, in my opinion, one of the best bronzing products ever. I just think it's so beautiful. All right, so he just did a lot of tapping. But I will say, and I've said it many times before, I love his new product, the Bronzing and Shaping Serum. But I just think if I had to pick of all his bronzing products, this is the one I would pick too. I love the Bronzing and Shaping Serum. That would be my second choice. But this one is just effortless. You just can't mess it up, really. I mean, it's just so good. So good. And the color light medium for my skin tone is pretty perfect. So if you have this product and you've never applied it over powder, maybe try it. Something else, I keep thinking of things that I remember him saying, but he also applied some of this on the jawline, but I thought it was really interesting. He actually turned the brush like this, and he kind of went like this, almost a little bit, not under the jawline, but like kind of not on top of the jaw, but not underneath like you see a lot. He kind of went like this instead of like going way under the jawline. I thought that was really interesting too. After every single thing that he did, he took the foundation brush, so the F4, and he used the side that he used for foundation, and he went over everything, like just went around the edges. He did that with every single step of the makeup. All right, after he applied the skin enhancer, he did go over and set it in place with his powder bronzer. I have the shade light medium. I think he used medium dark on her. But I have the shade light medium. He did say this isn't totally necessary, but he does typically do it, but he used very little. Like you didn't see much at all, like where he was doing it. He basically just kind of set it in place, kind of, and he did like a tapping motion. And he used this brush of his, which I think is the F2. It's like a dual-ended powder brush, so it has a larger side and a smaller side. But again, before he went on the skin, everything he did, he went like this. He never went directly on the skin with anything without first warming it up on his hand. I do really like his powder bronzers, and I think they're a little underrated because I don't hear many people talk about these, but I do think they're very good. All right, moving on to blush. He used his Plumping blush veils, which if you are familiar with my channel, you will know I love this product. I have 5 of them. I have 4 of his original ones, and then I have 1 of his newer Brights collection. But these are what he used. I don't have both shades that he used, but this is just such a good product. If you love the skin enhancer, this is that basically, but in a blush color. So I have 5 of them, like I said. He did use this one on her, which this one is just Peachy. This is one of the original shades. But he mixed it, of course, because like I said, he literally mixed every single product. He mixed it with one of the Brights collection, and it's not the one that I have. It was like Papaya Pop or something like that. He mixed that one with this one. I don't have Papaya Pop, so I thought we might mix these two because he said that he has always loved peaches and pinks. And he said he used to, his signature thing was mixing peach and pink blushes together. So I have a peach and a pink from his original collection, so I thought maybe we'll do that today. So I have Perfect Pink and just Peachy. So I thought we could mix these two so you get a little bit of both. And since he said that he liked to mix peaches and pinks, I figured we could do that. So I'm gonna use this brush again because he used this brush over and over. This is a fantastic brush. How should I do this? I'm gonna just grab a little bit of the peach one and a little bit of the pink one, and then just kind of tap it off. He kept doing this over and over. He would do this several times. He would go into the product, go on his hand, go into the product, go on his hand. He also had her smile when he was applying it, which I was happy to see. He wasn't, or he didn't really say he wasn't, but he didn't seem to be all about the whole like lifted blush thing where you apply it like way up here. I noticed that on her, he really brought the blush on the whole cheek, like here and here. I love the blush veils. I love them so much. Just like the skin enhancer, you just cannot mess them up. It's just, they're so beautiful. Okay, then after he did that, he once again flipped the brush and went over everything with the foundation side. When I tell you guys, I was zoned in. I was listening so hard to everything he said. And I was also trying to take a few clips on my phone, and I was trying to listen and really take in everything he was saying, but I was also just like flabbergasted to be sitting there watching him. So it was just, the masterclass was an hour long, and I wish it was longer, because I mean, I could have sat there and listened to him and watch him do somebody's makeup for hours and hours. And he actually, he used to do master classes, and he even brought this up at the very beginning. He used to teach master classes. I forget what year it was, but it was years ago now. And they were 6 hours long. And this master class was only 1 hour long. So he even said, you know, I'm not used to doing a master class in 1 hour. I usually spend several hours. And he also said that his makeup, when he does it on other people, it takes like 3 hours typically, which I would believe just based on watching him, because he's very like meticulous and just, he's an artist, and you can see it when you watch someone like him do makeup, and it's just fascinating. If you love makeup, I highly recommend watching the masterclass in its entirety that Sephora has on their channel, because it was amazing. Someone in the audience also asked him about sponges and what his opinion was on a makeup sponge, and he said he loves sponges, not really for applying products, but for melting them into the skin and melting everything together. So he said he usually does that after he's applied things. With a barely damp sponge, he does like to kind of go over it. Oh, one other thing he did do, he didn't use a ton of this, but I guess we'll use a little bit, and I don't have the color that he used, but he did use his powder blush over the top of the blush veils, but he used very little. Like, you could barely see where he had applied anything at all. But he said for like longevity purposes, he does like to set the cream products with powder. He just uses little tiny amounts of it. So I'm gonna take just a little bit, like I'm talking not much at all, of this blush of his. This is not the one he used. He used the Peachy shade. This one is Mellow Mauve. It's just kind of a neutrally pink. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and do my brows off camera. The model had her brows done when she came out, so he didn't do brows in the masterclass or really talk about them much. So I'm gonna do that quickly, and then we'll move on to the eyes. All right, let's move into the eyes. Like I said earlier, he did say he doesn't use eye primer. He uses concealer. So I'm gonna prime my eyes with a little bit of his concealer, and he used I forget what brush of his to do this, but I'm just going to use this Sigma E25 blending brush to just lightly apply the concealer on my lids. This is something I never ever do. I typically do apply something on my lids, but I usually use an eye primer. Like the Rare Beauty one or the Sigma ones. But yeah, he said he just prefers using concealer. All right, and then he did use his setting powder to set the concealer on the eyes. He used his EF1 brush for this, which is the brush he used for concealer, but he used the fluffier side of it. It kind of looks like this. I kind of want to get that brush now, actually, because that's really the only brush of his that he used that I don't have already. For eyeshadow, now this was super interesting too. He actually used the original Master Mattes palette on her, which I do have one here. Actually, This one's not been used. They sent me this a while ago, and I don't typically use this this palette because the tones in here don't work super well for my skin tone. But he did use this palette on her. He mixed this shade right here, which is shade 8, and this shade, shade 10. Those are kind of the two he mixed together on her. But for my skin tone, I was gonna use that palette, but then I think I might use his neutrals palette for me, just because these tones work better for my skin tone. So he did a smoky look on her, and the way he did it was very interesting to me. So I'm trying to decide which of these shades I'm gonna mix here. I might mix this shade and this shade. So this one's a little bit warmer, that one's a little bit cooler, but he did use pretty deep shades because this is a smoky look, and he used this brush, which is the E6, and he used this small little end. And this is not in any way how I would apply eyeshadow, but this is what he did. He took both shades, he went back and forth, got them on the brush, and then he mixed it kind of on his hand. And he took this small end. Now this feels so weird because I don't ever do this. He started the eyeshadow by applying those two deeper shades in the outer corner of the eye, just like this, with her eye open. That was how he started the eye look, which I never do that. I always kind of build things up gradually. He did not. He did that. And then he took a really big, like fluffy blending brush, and he started going like this. And he said he was blending up and out and diffusing it basically. And he used his fluffy brush for this. I forget what the brush number was, but it was his fluffy brush, but it looked just like this. And he just kept going back and forth, blending up and out. He said he wanted the most intensity here where he placed that shadow, and then he liked to blend everything outward and diffuse it. I would normally just take really light amounts of shadows like that and just gradually kind of blend it up or blend it out, but that is not what he did. Isn't that interesting? I would have never thought to do that. That's why I loved sitting in on this masterclass, because I just love to see how someone like him applies makeup. And you know, you always learn things from watching people do things. I thought it was fascinating. I loved it. Okay, so once he kind of had it blended out, and I probably could have gone even a little bit darker with that because he did go pretty smoky on her, but then he took the same brush again, went into those same two shades, went on his hand again. Then he used the brush with her eye open. He went right here, right where he said where the crease is, and added more color and kind of pulled it over and connected it. And then he went back in with that brush and blended it, and he even blended it in this way. And this is something else that he said that I just thought was just so interesting. He said a lot of people neglect this bone right here that you have. He said a lot of people leave that totally blank, and that's something that I definitely do. But he said this makes a really big difference, this bone right here. And he said if you are someone that likes to contour your nose, when you bring your shadow out like this way, this is how you connect to the contour and contour your nose. But yeah, I never really placed shadow here, but he said this is one of the most neglected areas on the eye, is this bone right here. And then he just kept like blending out, in, out, in, out, in. And that's how he did a smoky eye. Now, have you ever applied shadows like that? I definitely have not. If you watch my videos, you know I do a lot of building and applying light layers as I go. I never really do it all at once like that, but you know what? It blended out fine. And he said when you do this first step, like when you place that darker shadow, he was like, you don't want to go down too far, you don't want to go out too far with it. You just want to keep it in this outer corner here, because that's where the majority of the pigment is going to be. And he said some artists like to blend out more than they like to blend up, but that he was more into blending out and up, not so much this way. But he said it kind of depends on the makeup artist and even the eye shape. I also think it helps that he did this method, but he used his eyeshadow formula, because his mattes, in my opinion, are phenomenal. They are so easy to work with and blend. You know, if you did this technique with a shadow that wasn't as easy to work with, I think it might be a little bit difficult to place that color so opaquely like that and rely on the ability to blend. But, you know, with his shadows, that's not an issue at all, So while I'm finishing this eye, I'll kind of talk about Sephoria a little bit if you're not familiar. So basically, Sephora puts on this event once a year, and it's called Sephoria. And the location changes every year. This year it was in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's kind of hard to explain, but basically it's an event where a ton of brands sold at Sephora all come together, and they have these little booths. Each brand has a booth. There are 50 brands. So not every single brand that Sephora sells is there, but a lot of them are, and they all have a booth. And you go in, you buy a ticket, and you can go in and go to each booth, and they're all different. Some of the brands have like games you play to like win things. Some of the brands had like those little claw machine games. Do you remember those? Where you use the claw machine and you win a prize, like one of their products down in the machine. Some of them, just when you get up to the front of the line, they have, you know, their newest product there for you to play with, see the shades, all that. Some of them will just give you samples when you get up to the front of the line, but they all have a booth, and you basically go around. The event is 3 hours long, and you go around and you just collect all these samples from all the different brands. Some of them have merch. Some of them give you just their full-size products. It just depends on the brand. But that's basically what the event is. And then depending on which ticket you have, so there's 4 different tickets. There's 4 different sessions. There's a morning session, an evening session, and it's 2 days in a row. So there's 4 sessions. Mine was the first session on the second day, which was 11 to 2. And you go in and you can, you know, go to all the booths, obviously, but then towards the end of the event, they have master classes, and each year they change the master classes. They're all different. So each time slot, so all 4 sessions have a different master class. And the reason I bought my ticket for that time was because they announced early that Makeup by Mario was going to be the master class for that one. And you basically can get sit in on this master class. It's like an hour long, depending on which session you go to. So that's a little bit about the event. And then when the event is over, when you leave, you get a big bag full of goodies. And there's 2 different ticket types. There's a general admission and a VIP admission. I just had the general one, and the general one, you get a little bit of a smaller bag of goodies at the end. The VIP ticket, you get a lot more at the end, but the VIP ticket is obviously more expensive. And honestly, now that I've been once, I hope I can go again. I would definitely do the VIP ticket next time. I think it'd be more worth the money, but anyway, that's a little bit about Sephoria, and I loved it. But this was definitely the highlight, was this masterclass. All right, then he did use eyeliner. He used his eyeliners. So this is the Master Pro Pigment eyeliner, and he used this shade, which is the Perfect Brown. This is a great eyeliner. I've had this for a long time, but he used this one. So this is the Perfect Brown. It's a really deep chocolatey brown. So he took his eyeliner, and again, he warmed it up on his hand, And the way he applied this is kind of hard to explain, but the way he applied this was he kept her eyes open. Well, actually, no, she had her eyes closed for part of it, but he basically went like into the lashes, and it was hard to see. They had like a big jumbo like camera on him, so, and they had it displayed on projector so you could see a little bit better, but it was hard to kind of tell how he was doing this. But basically he was literally using it in between the lashes. Like you could see him kind of wiggling between the lashes. He didn't do much on the actual lash line other than at the very outer corner. He did a little bit, but he basically said he doesn't like to do a really thick line on the lash line because you're taking away lid space by doing that, which makes perfect sense. I can't stand it when I have like a thick line on my lash line because I don't have much lid space at all. And he said that. He said, you know, when you do that, you're taking away a lot of this here, especially if you have hooded eyes or you have smaller eyes. So he said he liked to really get as much of the product into the actual lashes as possible. And then he flipped, or he used the other end, which has this little brush on it like this, and he kind of went in the waterline and kind of pulled out just a little bit, not a lot. And then after he did that, he went into the waterline with the pencil. He like pulled her eyelid up and did this, and he went like nuts in the waterline. He really got in there with the waterline. And I will say his eyeliner is one of the best for the waterline. Besides the Victoria Beckham one, this one is really good for the waterline. After he did that, he went back to the brush, went in the waterline again, and kind of dragged out, just like barely. And then I want to say he did take like just a little bit of the liner on the top in this very outer corner. And then he used this brush again. He utilized this brush a lot on the end of his liner. One other thing that he did do is he took two of the lightest shades in the palette. So I'm going to take these two here, and he did talk about taking just a little bit of a lighter shade right here on the top part of the arch of your brow, not bringing it down any farther. He said you really want to keep it here because that pulls up the eye, gives the illusion of like a lift, is what he said. So he said he typically does it, but he only keeps it right here. I'm using the other side of that E6 brush that we use to place the shadow. He pretty much did the same thing on the bottom lash line that he did on the top, including putting the liner in the waterline. I'm probably not going to do that just because I don't love waterline liner on myself on the bottom personally. I just think it's a little too harsh, but he did really talk about connecting that bottom shadow to the top. So he kind of applied it and then kind of blended a little bit more. All right, he does not have a mascara yet, and someone in the audience did ask him when he was going to release a mascara, and he said that one has been in the works for a few years actually, but that he's so picky about it that he hasn't gotten it the way he wanted it yet. So that's why there's not been a mascara release. But then someone asked him like what his favorite was, if he had to pick one, and it was L'Oreal Voluminous, the original in Carbon Black, which I actually meant to buy before I filmed this video, but I forgot. He said that he likes a separating and lengthening formula, a buildable mascara formula. He does not like super intense mascara like right away, which I also thought was interesting. So I would assume when he does come out with a mascara, it's going to be like a buildable, more of like a clean lash mascara. And last, for the lips, he used his lip liners, of course, which, as you can see here, is one of my favorite products of his. I love them so much. He, of course, used 2 shades again. So he used Travis and Spiced Chai, which I have somewhere. And he kind of mixed the 2. So I guess we'll use these same 2 that he used. So he used Spiced Chai first, and he kind of explained his overlining technique, which he's very famous for. So he said the reason he likes to overline the top lip, and mainly like in the center here, is because it shortens the distance from the nose to the top of the lip, which gives like a lifted, youthful look. Because obviously as we age, things start to sag, you know, gravity comes into play, and this shortens this area, basically giving the illusion that the face has not gotten longer. So that's kind of his thinking behind it, as he explained it. So he kind of overlines the bottom here and the top right here, and then he follows the lip line on the outer corners. He did also use the liner quite a bit. I love that about his lip liners, that they have this little brush. He also started from the Cupid's bow and went down, which is something very different for me. I don't typically do that. I typically go from the corner up, but he did the opposite. So he kind of lined like that, and he used Spiced Chai for this stuff, and then he kind of went around with his brush and blended it a little bit. She also had amazing lips naturally, so he didn't have to do much for her. And then he didn't do much with Travis. Oh, mine's stuck. All right, I cannot get the Travis cap off, so I don't know why. So I'm gonna use a little bit of this one, which is Hue. And I'm gonna kind of add a little bit of this. This one's more of like a pinky shade, and just kind of going around where that one was, kind of filling in a little bit. And then I don't think he actually used one of his lipsticks. He did use the Plumping Lip Serum, which we'll use in a minute. I don't think he used any of his lipstick. If he did, I don't remember it. I'm gonna take just a little bit of this one. This is the shade Sam, and I'm just gonna apply a little bit of this, and he did this a lot. He used the lip brush, and then he did use the Moisture Glow Lip Serum. He used the one shade that I don't have, which is Honey Glow. It's a really pretty kind of sheer brown. I don't have that one. I kind of want it now that I saw him use it. But he didn't go directly on the lips. He took a little bit on the lip brush and added it like this. All right, he did finish the makeup with his new setting spray, the Surreal Skin Soft Setting Mist. I don't have that product, so I'm not gonna do that, but he did finish the makeup off with that, and that is everything. Every little nugget of information that I picked up from him. I really enjoyed filming this, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. If you want to see the whole masterclass, they did film it, and I will link it in the description box. If you love makeup and if you love Makeup by Mario, I would highly recommend watching that whole masterclass. It was just the coolest experience, so much fun to sit there and just watch him, listen to him, answer questions, and just apply the makeup. It was heaven for me, truly. And I feel like in 1 hour, learned so many little helpful pieces of information that I wanted to share with all of you. So I hope you enjoyed it. All the products and the shades and everything that I used, I will put in the description box and link it for you. If you shop through my links, I do make a commission that supports my channel, so thank you so much for that. And if you're new, I hope you'll subscribe and follow me over on Instagram at simply.blair and TikTok simply.blair1. And I will see you again very soon. Remember, simply be you.